Can
Hello,
you hear
John.
me? Hi, how are you?
Doing good, and you?
Not too bad, thank you. Not too bad at all. Um, it-
Perfect.
I've been doing, I'm sure you're not surprised, doing a little bit of homework on what your application does. It reminded me of a paper I wrote in 2005 where I used algorithms to establish for MRO parts for the D&D, Department of National Defense, floor and ceiling prices in a non-dynamic purchase, and it gave the range from that. And then, of course, that would
Okay.
be adjusted with every transaction that would come in. And that's the first thing. That's the first thing that I thought about when I looked at. There's a couple of things, and I'll let you know what I'm thinking, and then you can tell me how I may miss the point of all this. But it's literally going out to the marketplace in an Amazon-like platform, because 5 years ago, everyone was saying, why can't we buy at work the same way we buy at home and have
Hmm.
the certainty? Now, granted, it isn't for all product, but I think what I see you have is you've automated that process with algorithms to be able to go out to the marketplace and very easily provide a vehicle by which transactional type purchases can be made simply and quickly. We're not talking about complex purchases, we're talking about high level transaction, which then frees up the buying organization to focus on more strategic things rather than having people talk. Like, give you an idea with the D&D, when I launched my software program with them, this was back in the late 90s, early 2000, they had 18 or 23 people, purchasing people, doing the buying of their MRO and direct. Within
Hmm.
18 months, they were down to 3 people.
Hmm.
And the savings were significant. So, I sold that company, by the way, for 12 million back in 2001. But I look at
Well
this.
done.
Yes. Well, I look at what you've done, and I think you've made it accessible. I also see something basic for industry specific application in there. When I looked and saw the dental, and then I saw the other categories that you are building up. I don't know. You remember the basic four, do you?
The
No.
basic four.
It was a computer system that was used, a platform used to do industry specific applications. And what happened
Uh-huh.
in the early days is a lot of companies spent their own money, like in the dental industry, spent
Right.
their own money to develop a system that worked for them, and then has an effort to recoup their investment because they got their site running. They would break off a separate division and try to sell it to the other market. I mean,
Right.
it conceptually had a good idea, but buying from competitors or selling to competitors in the same industry sector had its problem. So when I look at what I see, what you've done is you've basically are the manifestation of, we have become more strategic in our buying or free up our time to buy more strategically, which means this system provides detailed information, reporting, logging, and certainty that you're getting the right product at the right price. And again, it's low dollar value. Usually, I see it as indirect MRO, not complex.
Mhm.
But what you're saving, the biggest saving is tapping into the existing market reliably. You are going to need, I think you're going to have an impact on FTE time, FTE. I think that's a big part of your selling avenue with it. The reporting mechanisms look good. But again, I see it as being the manifestation of the long awaited, well, we've got to become more strategic as a procurement
Yeah.
department. And
Yeah.
so that's what I'm
Well,
saying. Like, that's my take on it. So
yeah, sure.
I
Yeah.
miss the boat.
No, I mean, I think not completely. So I think there is a lot of truth in that. But let me give you the genesis of this because so I think like you have been in that space for a long time. So I mean, for me, it's been 25 years now, and my first exposure to this was with IBM, and at the time there was a solution called RedCat, which was essentially a Lotus Notes based solution that IBM built in the 90s. Really for its own internal purpose, and as part of the transformation of the company, which really looked at kind of creating synergies. And procurement was a big space, of course, for them. So I saw this. I saw Ariba. We actually transferred the assets to Ariba and i2 at the time as part of the IBM i2 Ariba alliance. And of course I saw Coupa. But what's interesting is that at the time when, I mean, the process still works very similarly today, right? So you have strategic sourcing people that go out, source, negotiate, have preferred suppliers, and all of that good stuff. Those contracts are made available to employees for them to buy. Of course, they do that also for direct material, and we're not touching direct. And direct is oftentimes, at least for large enterprise, it's machine driven, right? For smaller companies, they still even buy those things manually. They go to websites and they buy, but otherwise it's largely enterprise. So, but when IBM put those contracts, made those contracts available for employees to buy, the only way they had at the time to do this was to create a catalog. And they had, with Lotus Notes and the tiles that you had on Lotus Notes, they could have different forms for different kinds of products and services that you were trying to buy. And so they did that because there was no e-commerce at the time. They were counting e-commerce, and e-business was the big thing at the time, but it did not exist. All transactions, or most transactions, were still done over the phone, emailed to some degree, but there was and a bit of EDI, of course, for some of the primary kind of tube of transactions. But that's what it was. Now, fast forward to today, the actual penetration of B2B digital transaction is over 35%. I don't think we'll ever reach 100%. But what it means is that globally, this is globally, right? And probably in the US, it's much higher. But we've reached a tipping point that basically says those e-commerce platforms exist. And as a matter of fact, if you look into the Coupa customer base, P&G is one that has pretty much basically made all their purchase transactions, at least the discovery of what people can buy, via punch out. And you might be familiar with that technology. So basically, they go into Coupa, they search, they find the supplier name, they click, they arrive on whatever supplier's website, and then they bring the card back. So being able to buy like consumers on a very rich, purposefully designed website by a vendor, by a supplier, is possible today. What we needed to solve was, how do I access those particular pricing? I mean, this is relatively simple. SSO enables to do that. You don't need to do anything for that. And then, of course, it's like, well, okay, that's great. But then how do I get all this approval in place? Well, we've solved that. I mean, it's not that hard. The way we do it is essentially by looking at, and we attach that to the card somehow. We make that as part of the payment process and say, hey, before I give you the right to buy, do you have the authorization to do so? Do you have the budget? Is it a preferred supplier? Is it in policy? And if all of those three things work or are true, then we give you a card for that specific transaction so you can pay for it. But your experience is exactly the one of the consumer. And at the end of that transaction, if we just capture essentially the order details, which is your receipt, and we attach that. So of course, the value for an organization is, I mean, not only you have empowered employees, because I mean, now suddenly they're happy. I mean, they don't have to wait hundreds of days or whatever it is to actually get something through. They don't have to advance, in fact, also the payment if they use their own card for payment. But they get things done, right? So you have an empowered employee base. At the same time, you don't have to pay millions of dollars to have some software that runs on top of other type of existing software. So you don't need that. Suppliers don't need to onboard. This is not needed in that way. And then I think one thing that you said, which is really, I think, spot on, because this is what we see, where we see a lot of value also, and our customers are highlighting that. There is no more, I mean, you don't have that PO approval process because it's by exception. So it's still there, but it works by exception. You do not have an invoice anymore. There's no invoice because you pay with card, but you still have, of course, the transaction and the receipt. So, and you do not have expense claims because the employee doesn't have to advance the money. And at the same time, you have security because our cards, unlike a P card or unlike a corporate card, it's not John has a limit of 10,000 or 20,000 a month. No, it's per transaction. It's just a mean of payment. It's not you own a card. You don't own a car. So that's really kind of the value that they see. And this is really, I think, like the bulk of it. So this is what we've changed by observing just the sheer fact that, you know, yes, B2B digital commerce penetration is now at the tipping point. Yes, what's interesting also when you break that down, the actual P2P application only represent a tenth of that total transaction. And the growth of that particular layer of that segment is minimal. Everything happens on marketplaces and on storefront, e-commerce storefront. So this is where the growth is actually happening. This is where transactions actually take place. And I think, as you pointed it out also, what's interesting is that nowadays, so with Bluebeam, as if you can pay with a card, Bluebeam works. It doesn't matter what it is. It can be a service, it can be MRO, it can be anything. It doesn't matter. And it's important because, you know, as we say, right, software eats the world. I mean, now yourself and myself, as we sign up for a Netflix account, we not only choose the package, we not only pay, and we consume on that very same front end. Well, it's the same in enterprise. If you want to buy an Amazon AWS, or you're buying Heroku, you're buying Linear, you're buying Figma, whatever, a lot of those services nowadays, because of the digital transformation that companies are essentially going through, those services are being found, experienced, bought, and consumed on that particular website. So, I mean, it's a different world, right? So we're ready. Essentially, we're ready for this, right? It has to happen.
Okay, you made me think of two case studies from a few years, many years ago. In the first instance, a major U.S. retailer invited us down to their head office because what they had done is they were buying, and I'm just using MRO parts as an example here.
Right.
They were buying MRO parts, and what they said is what we did is we negotiated to say we're going to compress the number of vendors with whom we buy, from whom we buy. We're going to a volume discount, better visibility and control over that compression. And they said, well, wait a second. Okay, so they had it for about 2-3 years, and they said, well, can you do an analysis with your algorithm tool and tell us where we stand? Because their only what you call source of truth was the 100 vendors that they had compressed down to. It turned out that the type of product they were buying, that gradually over the couple of years, they ended up paying a premium of around 23% over and above what the market rates were for those products.
Right. Right.
So what they were trying to do was do a complex direct material contract negotiation with regards to a product that needed that flexibility to get to market in real time. And so that 20% helped them revisit and say, okay, how do we tap into that market? Another example is the Power Transmission Association. I remember giving a lecture to about 300 people in 2005. And they had in the US with contracts, and they sort of, with the power transmission that goes into automobiles, they had a 32% Maverick spend, and it ballooned to 79%. Now, what was the problem with that is that the people who had gone through the painful process of onboarding and getting as approved and getting a price negotiated weren't getting anywhere near the volume of business that they had expected for that effort. On the other side, the buying was done, and the buyers were saying, front lines, why would I pay 20% more to buy off a contract when I can go through here? And of course, back then the answer was, well, because we have full visibility with the contract, but we don't have that in the going marketplace. So what you've done is, I see, being the next generation, is you've created an ability. Maverick spend was always a limited of a limit of technology inability
Right.
to
Right.
engage the real market in real time. And I think what you've done is you've created a real-time market engagement tool that enables
Yeah.
somebody to press on, but you've created with this an audit trail so that you then appease okay, we don't have to worry about limiting the number of suppliers with whom we're dealing with, because we do, after all, have control. And the challenges with P cards, because some people say we hate them, is that you've eliminated that as well. That's what I'm seeing in terms of what you've done. And as you expand into more categories, handle other areas, but you also have a general market, you're going to be able to provide this same accountability down the line.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yet you're not forcing people to comply, buyers to comply with a contract that may or may not be in the best interest of the company.
So
Is
yeah.
that like, does that make sense?
Yes. Yes. So John, and this was our initial. This is how we got into the market in the first place. But I think there is a distinction that I've seen, at least in the market, in terms of what different segments of the markets really care about. So when we started, what you're saying is exactly true, right? So it was like, okay, we can provide essentially real-time pricing on a bunch of very well-known stores, and we still do that. So you can actually get that through Bluebeam. That's great. And then, of course, we even went into certain segments because that's where we have customers, and they say, hey, can you do that because a big chunk of my spend as a biotech company is lab supplies, is this, is that. Okay, yes, so we can try to do that. And then, same was with dental. And there we decided to partner with a purchasing group, the dental purchasing group. And all of that is still possible, and it's still true. But the interest, so if you think about the market, the larger the companies, the less interest they have, in fact, in this price discovery thing. It's a nice kind of add-on, but it's not what they care about. And perhaps it's an hyperbole, right? Because for the reversed one, so for the small businesses, they care about that.
Right.
The ones that are in the mid-market, so to say, they don't care about that. Their problem is really the backroom. The small business do not have a backroom problem. They do, but it's too small for them to care really about it. Companies that are above, 50, 100 million and that are growing, they have that pain because they have more people that come in and accounts payable gets hammered. They don't want to distribute plastic cards. So they have an actual backroom problem. They could get scale benefit, of course, from purchasing, but it's really not what they care about. The CFO cares about his basic problem, which is day-to-day, closing the books, paying the expenses. So they want to essentially kind of solve that. So that's where we have the biggest impact. When you go to the larger ones do not necessarily have the same growth. They still care about productivity improvement. I think they care about much more. They care about the experience for their users. They care about the empowerment of the people. They still care about overall productivity and efficiency. They see like what we do on discount codes and all of that as an interesting add-on for price discovery and potentially not missing out on certain opportunities. And because it's non-disruptive in our platform, okay, it's there, it's fine, it's nice. And so they can tap into that, but it's not primary. So it's interesting because depending on the size of the company, the interests shift.
User experience. It's funny, is back in 2000s, there was talk that Microsoft was going to purchase SAP. And the reason for that partnership, it was the Mendocino project, it came duet, was because they thought they could use the user experience and comfort with the Microsoft Office applications as an entry point to utilize SAP. So you're right. There are different ways on this. I mean, Tailspin, like again with the MRO parts for the D&D, and they're spending millions. For them, it was responsibility for tax, for getting the product on time, the right product. Uh, but even more so, they were discovering with some parts, MRO for IT, is the price for a part in the morning maybe $150. But by the time you got the price later in the day from other suppliers, it would go up to
Right,
$900. And so
right,
we had
right.
this dynamic flux within the day itself. So there, see, that's the nice thing is you've sort of pollinated across each primary interest, but there's these
Yeah,
ancillary benefits that you provide: user
right, right.
experience, clarity and truth, and
Yeah,
then pricing and management because they don't have back office.
yeah,
That's what is
yeah,
that
yeah.
what
No,
you're saying?
yeah, yeah. I think that's I think a good summary, and I think so when it comes to at least priorities for us. So everything related to very small business and actual price discovery. So we'll continue to have our coupon codes. We will continue to have some partnerships, and we will probably add some more. But from a go-to-market perspective, that's not how we're going to market, because it's not. If I look at building a business, an actual business, this is not where I make the most money. I mean, I make
Right.
money with companies that actually value the backroom optimization first. And so the everything related to price, and you're going to eventually see obviously a lot more innovation there. There are great stuff that actually are happening in the consumer space, which is incredible that we're going to add into our platform with people that have built those things in the first place. So those kinds of things will come, but I think in addition to what we already have, and we will push that. But first and foremost is having essentially the extension in on the browser of all potential business users you could think of. And I think for us, it's if you think about, so mid market is really where we focus on. Enterprise, we have inbound interest, right? So they're coming to us and they say, hey, can you help us on tailspend, right? Because that tailspend solution today provide you a way to control what you've been spending after the fact. And here,
Yes.
of course, Bluebeam allows you to stop anything to happen even before it takes place. So, and so I think there is that great interest there. And then of course there's our mid-market play, which is okay, backroom optimization, no invoice, no expense claim, less AP, less people in the finance department to actually deal with that. That's really where we can see ourselves grow, and then eventually adding those type of capabilities above and beyond what we do. Right. So on my roadmap, if you look at what we're currently doing, is it's more about it's addressing different types of spend. So right now, we can do any catalog, any one-time purchase, no problem. That works extremely well. Now what we're building is subscription, because subscription are very different. And how do you handle subscription, by using essentially our extension? And of course, we have a way to do that, and we're building, testing, and then rolling that out. What we're also doing is T&E. So we have a mobile app that we're building as we speak that essentially works similarly but differently than what a Expensify or any of those would actually work, where first you spend and then you actually get your picture of whatever. Here essentially it works the other way around. You snap what you're about to spend, we recognize what you're about to spend, and then we give you a card. So it's the same process, but then there is no more chasing for receipts. There is no such thing. So we care about that. Okay, so how much of that type of card type spend we can address. And then because we're talking about card, today Bluebeam has its own card. But the more, of course, we're pushing through the card, the more working capital becomes important. So terms become important. So we have, and we're going to officially announce that in the next couple of weeks or 3 weeks or so, depending on the process with that bank. But we basically have a partnership with Amex. So we're going to be able to just tokenize Amex card. So if you are a corporate account and you have 60 days, 90 days, whatever you have, line of credit, you'll be able to tap into that Amex, and we'll provide virtual card, one-time virtual card for any of your purchase. So that's going to allow us to tap into customers that don't want to go into prepaid, that want to essentially kind of benefit from that. And we're currently working on building also a partnership with another kind of some sort of infrastructure player that will essentially allow us to tap into over 70 banks at the same time. So we're going to be able, so if you do not want to use the Bluebeam card, but you want to use JP Morgan or Citi, well, you'll be able to do that. So, so for us, that's kind of where things matter a lot more than, okay, I'm going to add you more discounts and discounts and discounts. This is very much, I think it's a nice add-on. So even the website you see change a little bit so that we refocus the message on really like three things that matter for us a lot. And that is essentially, we're talking about empowering user. We're talking about, controlling spending. We're talking about automating the backroom, right? So those are like the three core messages, I think, for us it's not anymore trying to mimic a consumer experience. It is a consumer experience. There's no, it just is. There's nothing else.
All right. Well, listen, I'm going to digest this. This interview is being recorded, etc., because I want the natural explanation of all of these things, because you want to be able to create some context of understanding where you fit in. So I'm going to write a little bit about this, share a little bit about this. Then I'm going to come back to you in about a week or so, and I'll see what kind of response, etc., and questions I get. I like I said, it is very, very interesting how the maturation process from way back is now coming into its own. And that the overarching implementation periods, complexity, and all these other elements, because I mean, let's face it, and it's held true through the ERP era, and I've been in high tech since the early '80s. So, and you mentioned Lotus, and I smiled because I remember when VisiCalc came on, and I also find it very interesting that that Excel is still in use. And it's not diminishing, it's actually expanding in use. So it tells you something about the basis. So when you mentioned the Notes Foundation, it kind of makes me smile. But let me do some further analysis. I'm going to share this discussion with my readers because I think you've really described it very closely. And then I'll follow up with you in about a week or so.
Yeah, no, with great pleasure. And if you need anything, of course, John, I'm at your disposal. Happy to give you also a demo of the product so you can see how it actually looks like. You probably have seen also on our website because we do show it on the website. And I think perhaps one more thing is now we're not talking about, like a 6-month implementation.
Yeah.
I mean, the reason why this takes perhaps around 2 weeks is when you decide to essentially use the Bluebeam card and you need to go through a KYB process and you need to fund your account. And ACH still takes about 4 days. So this is what blocks essentially like an immediate, but with American Express, for the American Express corporate and business account holders, basically they will just literally connect their account to Bluebeam and they're ready to go in as much time as it takes for them to establish their spend limit, add their suppliers into the preferred supplier list, and that's really about it. So it's I mean, I know I do have plenty of friends in Accenture and others. They might not, I know they don't probably quite like that or need to think about how they can add value. But yes, it's a very, very fast-paced implementation.
Well, you know what? I think it's going to be very interesting. And one of the next things I'd look at doing, and that's where I'll test the response, is it may be a good idea to do what you would call a small group demo to senior executives to see how that works. But you know what? Let's share this and get out. I really appreciate your time today, and we will be talking again within the next week or so.
Thank you very much for your interest, John. Appreciate it. Have a great week. Take care.